I have a question for you. Who's in charge here in the audience? You? Or were you just scratching your nose? May I take my jacket off? Is that all right? All right. I put him in charge, so that's it. I hope most of you know my colleague, Luca Parmitano. He and I are going to try to tag team. So what you're going to get today is going to be Luca Parmitano and Kathy and Charlie Bolden. Kathy's Luca's, she's right down here, and I will don't worry, Kathy, don't get scared. I thought about having Kathy lecture you because she has had an interesting vantage point to view what Luca and I are going to talk about. You know, when you're home and you've got the kids and everything, we have fun. That's what we do. We go have fun. We work really hard at it, and I think Luca will tell you that. And it's very exciting for us. But then there are folk that are back home, you know, spouses and kids and everybody else, and they have fun every once in a while. Other than the few times that they're having fun, they're generally just full of fear and stuff like that. And Luca's got a story that I want him to tell you about. I asked Kathy earlier, how quickly did she know that he was in trouble? And she said she looked at the faces of people in Mission Control in Houston, and she knew almost right away. And some of you are wondering, what is he talking about? But I'm going to let Luca tell you there. There are a couple of things that I want to do, and I know Luca does too. This is your time. Whatever time we have, we want to be able to talk about something that interests you. We're very flexible. We're both pilots, and so we're going to switch the lead here. I'll fly lead a little while, and then he'll fly lead, and when he's flying lead, I'll be on his wing. You all don't know what I'm talking about, but don't worry about it. But we want to hear what you want us to talk about. So I have two rules. Rule number one, ask questions anytime. You know, like I said, there are a few slides. We don't have to use any of them, and we may not, as a matter of fact. But rule number one is ask questions anytime. Rule number two, there are no dumb questions. It doesn't matter how embarrassed you may think you're going to be by asking the question. You may feel worse by not asking, because if there's a question on your mind, I can guarantee you there are probably a whole bunch of other people here in the auditorium who really wished that they had asked the question, and so you will have the courage to ask it for them. I am known at NASA headquarters, since I'm supposed to be in charge, I don't have any problem asking the dumb questions. And as a general rule, I see a look of relief on people's face in meetings when I ask the dumb question, because they're sitting there, we talk in acronyms, we talk in big terms, we do all kinds of stuff, and frequently nobody but the speaker knows what the heck we're talking about. And so I usually raise my hand and say, okay, I got a question. and I ask it, and everybody else goes, phew. So please, ask questions, no dumb question. I'm going to take just a few minutes before I ask Luca to come up and talk a little bit, just to tell you who we are. Who is NASA? What are we? What do we do? So if you can go to the next one there. That's my lesson for you. I know you said that's basic stuff. And it is basic stuff. It's nothing that you all don't already know. We have any students who are not at the Polytechnic here? Any high school students or anything like that? Okay, so that's really basic stuff. What's your name?
Antonio.
Antonio. The one on the left, does that mean anything to you? Is your professor in here? Huh? Oh, Antonio's, see, he's now pretending he doesn't understand. You can keep it. No, let him keep it. See, Antonio was understanding everything I said until we got to the study hard part. And then Antonio started reaching for his headset. I don't understand. You know the study hard part. Is your professor in here?
I don't know.
You don't know? How about your neighbor there? What's your name?
Luca.
Luca. No, another Luca. Then I know you know. What does the study hard part mean? Does that mean anything to you? And I won't dwell on this very long.
It's very difficult, but we are here for studying hard.
Yeah. And it's basic. You're here at the Polytechnic, and if you want to be successful, you've really got to study hard. So I'm just talking about basic things. Take advantage of the opportunity you have here. And it was already pointed out, you're in one of the best schools in Italy. So study really hard. Take advantage of this environment. The second thing, the work hard part may be hard for some of you to understand. How many of you play sports? Who's a football player? And I know over here football is soccer. But no soccer players? None? They don't let you out? Any swimmers? I mean, raise your hand if you're... Yes? Okay. You swim? Are you good?
I used to swim, but most I played water polo. So
Oh, water
step.
polo player. Long toenails?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
You shape them and stuff like little knives? Anybody else play water polo? This guy plays dirty. Water polo players cheat.
No.
They do all kinds of stuff. Did you have a coach?
Yeah. I had-
What did your coach tell you all the time if you want to win?
My coach told me to work hard.
Work hard. That's all what I'm talking about. If you want to win in sports, you have to work hard. You're here in school. If you want to win academically, you have to work hard. And so just as you would study and work very, very hard, whether you're a piano player or a violinist or a football player or a wrestler or a swimmer, it makes no difference. You've got to really work hard. You got to put your heart in it. So when you're in the classroom, just focus on whatever the subject matter happens to be. And then when you go out, party. Party really. You have to work hard at partying too, okay? You all know that. So work as hard when you're in the classroom. And then the last thing I want to tell you, because Luca knows what this means, you cannot be afraid of failure. You cannot be afraid of failure. And we see it in a lot of different ways. I'm from Columbia, South Carolina, the capital city of Columbia in the South. And when I grew up, the South was segregated, which meant people like me didn't go to school with people like Luca. We were separated by race. So there were frequently times that I wanted to do something, but I didn't because I was afraid that they would say no, or I was afraid that I wouldn't be allowed to do it. Some of you have been wanting to do something, but you're small, and you think you got to be a certain size. That's wrong. And particularly those of you who happen to be female, frequently you're told you can't do things. Don't listen to anybody who tells you can't do something. Don't be afraid of failure. Don't be afraid of taking risks. If you study hard and you work hard and you set your mind to it, you can do anything you want to do. I have 3 beautiful granddaughters. I have a daughter who's a plastic surgeon, and I tell them all the time, my wife and I tell them, don't waste your time trying to explain to somebody why you are where you are. Just do what you know how to do. Do it, be the best at your job, and people will understand why you are there sooner or later, or they will be working for you, and then you can fire them, So just seriously, do not be afraid of failure. Next one. This is our legacy. NASA started out more than 100 years ago as an organization that was called the National Advisory Committee on Aeronautics. When the United States, although the Wright brothers had invented airplanes, the Europeans took it and ran with it. And they were just starting to build planes and use planes for all kinds of stuff. And America wasn't doing anything with them. And they looked up and realized that, boy, we're falling behind in our own field. And they established this organization to try to get America back into the business of aviation again. In 1958, when the Soviets flew Sputnik over here, it scared the living stuff out of us. Because for the first time, we had seen that a nation could put something in space. And if they could put something in space, even a little satellite, there was no telling what they could do. And a president at that time, Dwight Eisenhower, said, okay, we, the United States, need to get into space. And he established the National Aeronautics and Space Administration as a successor to NACA. And so we absorbed the aeronautics duties, but then went talking about space, particularly humans in space. And so that's kind of the heritage of Luca and I. That's how we got into this business. And what I want you to recognize there is that space is international. When you look at the people in these images, and those are images from the International Space Station, you have 2 generations here with Luca and me. I'm a shuttle guy, so I'm a camper. That's the way I describe it. My long mission, really long, on shuttle was 9 days. Luca spent 6 months in space. He lived and worked in space. I camped. You could hold your breath for 9 days almost. You trained a lot and you worked very hard, but not at all like we do today. Human beings live and work in space, and we live and work in space in teams that are international. And it's not just fake, it's real. With everything going on Earth today, all the turmoil, the fact that when you look at the papers, Russia and the United States are not talking to each other, that may be true down here. That is not true in space. For the last 14 years, almost 15 years now, there has not been 1 second, not one single second, when human beings have not been living and working 250 miles above Earth on the International Space Station. And it's at least been an American and a Russian, and frequently it's been multiple people of multiple countries. And you should be very proud because with some great frequency, one of those representatives has been an Italian. And I've got one of the best who's sitting with me today, and we want to tell you a little bit about our experience. Next slide. NASA is, that's one from the old days. Luca's looking and laughing because he says, man, I think I remember some of that from the old days. That's what life used to be like on the space shuttle. It was roomy for us, nothing at all like it is on the International Space Station today. And you can see there's no up or down because gravity, and you all are smart people, so I'm not going to tell you that gravity is overcome. Technically, that's not right. You know, gravity is always there. You're constantly falling as you go around Earth. And we're going so fast that gravity just can't pull you down. So you're constantly falling. Did I get that right? Is that close? He says close enough. That's all right. So we get the sensation that we're floating. It's a lot of fun. But there is no up or down because your inner ear, which depends on the gravity vector, doesn't have it, and so you don't know what's up or down. NASA does human space flight. We do lots of science. We do incredible aeronautics. So we are helping American industry and industry in other countries to make faster airplanes, more efficient airplanes, quieter airplanes, make it safer for you to fly. In science, it's just phenomenal what we're doing. And we have 4 primary areas. Planetary science, that, it used to look at planets in our solar system. When I was growing up, there were 9. Today, there are 8. I still think there are 9. I'm a Pluto guy, and Pluto's a planet, but that's okay, I don't count. So call it a dwarf planet. Today, we look at thousands of planets. So planetary science today, thanks to satellites like Kepler, looks at literally thousands of planets, and thousands of those are Earth-like planets. We think some of them are so Earth-like that they may harbor life. So we ask ourselves 2 questions in NASA. How did all this stuff get here? The astrophysicists spend a lot of time thinking about it. The other fundamental question we ask is, are we alone? You know, people ask me all the time, especially kids, you believe in aliens? And I have to say, nah, I'm not sure I believe in aliens, but I do believe there is life elsewhere in the universe. I just think there has to be life somewhere else in the universe. When you find it, it won't look like you, probably. It'll probably be some little microbe or something like that, but that's life, and that's what we're looking for. We have precursors on Mars. We are getting a mission ready to go to a giant moon of Jupiter called, Europa. So we're looking all over the universe, not just in our solar system. Then we have Earth science, which looks at our own planet, trying to help us understand it so that we don't mess it up any more than we've already done. Trying to make sure that we can preserve it so that you and your kids and grandkids can really enjoy life here. And then the final thing we have now is technology development. It's a new directorate, and we look at developing the technologies that are going to enable us to go to Mars. So that's NASA in a nutshell. Let me get Luca to come up here right now because he's got some philosophy too. We're full of philosophy. We try to pass our philosophy on to you. If you don't ask us questions, guess what? We're going to ask. Okay? So please ask questions. Don't be bashful. Luca, take it.
And like a good pilot, I'll follow your lead and do the exact same thing and step in forward. It's really hard to follow somebody like Charlie Bolden because he's the administrator of NASA, and there's a reason for that. So I will just steal words here and there to talk to you about my experience. Right in the middle, there's an astronaut that, to me, is the embodiment of what we do in space as humans. And it's an astronaut in an EMU suit, extravehicular mobility unit. And the reason why, to me, it's the embodiment is because science and technology, when we talk about human spaceflight, are used for exploration. And that right there is the essence of exploration. Because to us, to humans, exploration is putting our feet, putting our boots on the soil of a planet that has never been explored before. Mars, Europa. Yes, we are going there with our probes, with our robots, with our rovers, but we want to put our feet. We want to leave that print. We want to see the sand flowing in our gloves. And to do that, we need that. We need a spacesuit. We need to be able to go extra outside of our spacecraft. We need to be able to go outside. And so these three things, technology, science, and exploration, are the essence of what we do as humans in space. And it's incredibly important. I cannot even stress how important it is. It is our nature. It's what makes us humans, is to question, to ask those questions. What is out there? How can we get there? What's on the horizon and what is beyond the horizon? Now, all those things are what make those questions make us humans. And so we want to do those things. Now, I have a story concerning human spaceflight and EVA, extravehicular activities, that answer also stealing another sentence from Charlie, is about failure. Don't be afraid of failure. Oh, yes, that is a fantastic statement. How do you take a statement like that, do not be afraid of failure, and make it happen? Well, I have a story about failure. My failure. It happened about 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago.
Is that right, Kathy? You got it like day, second?
July 16th, July 16th of 2013. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Raise your hands. I see a couple of hands shaking. The swimmer here, he knows. We've been swimming together, so I told him the story. So on July 16th, 2013, I was so ready to go out with my crewmate, Chris Cassidy, and do an EVA, an extravehicular activity on the space station. It was my second extravehicular activity. So I had spent 6.5 hours outside of the space station the previous week, which makes me an absolute expert on EVAs, at least according to my point of view. However, I was really a rookie with a lot of questions and a lot of doubts and a lot of question marks about my capability, about what I can do and what I cannot do. So about 45 minutes into the extravehicular activity, where I was kind of jammed in a very tight space, I was doing a test where I was trying to reach a very enclosed space and figuring out whether or not it was possible to operate a spacesuit into such an enclosed space. I was just done with that activity when I felt something that was not right. And as a pilot, you have to take those sensations and figuring out whether or not it's just you or is it really something that you want to take care of. And well, when you're outside the space station in vacuum with a spacesuit, which is the only thing that keeping you alive, well, you do want to listen to those sensations. So I felt water in my helmet. How did I feel the water? Well, I have a surface on my head that is very, very sensitive to changes. And so when I moved my head and I felt something cold, and it was not what I was expecting. It was not what I've been taught, what I've been trained for. And so I knew that some action had to be taken. So I called Houston. And I did not say, Houston, we have a problem, which I'm very proud of that. But instead I said Shane Kimbrough, another astronaut, a colleague astronaut that's going to space next year. He was my IV, my intravehicular astronaut on the ground. I said, Shane, I feel a lot of water in my helmet. And now knowing what happened, I can just imagine the mission control center with all the consoles and all the flight controllers and their stations, just looking up and having a big question mark on their heads, thinking, did he just say that he had a lot of water in his helmet? And the questions came back. It's like, what kind of water is it? And I had no idea. Well, I don't know. Is it bodily fluids? Meaning, did I relieve myself and it floated back? No, because it's cold. Is it sweat? Well, it could be sweat, but I've only been outside for a very little. You know, how much can I sweat? And actually, I said that. How much can I sweat? Because it feels like a lot of water. So all these questions went through my head because there was that little light. Did you do something wrong? Did you fail something? Did you break something? Did I do a motion? Did I bump my very precious spacesuit in a way that broke it? These are very nagging questions when you're, again, outside in vacuum. And so that fear of failure is there. But you cannot let that fear paralyze you. You know, if there is something wrong and you don't know what is the source of the failure, maybe it's the suit, maybe it's you cannot let that paralyze you. Now, the astronauts are perfectly normal humans, despite what you may believe and of us being crazy or something. But in general, we are pretty normal. And so we are normal people who are put in a situation that is extraordinary. And in order to do that, we have a lot of support. And so at that moment when I was in trouble and I didn't have a clear idea of what was going on, somebody else took over. The team on the ground, whose only job is to support those astronauts on orbit, they took charge. They tell me, okay, Luca, we don't know what is happening because we don't have a clear idea of what failed. We do not know because this has never happened before. We don't know where the water is coming from. We don't know how much water. We take action. You go back inside. So that's what I'm talking about, the fear of failure, because to me that spacewalk was incredibly important at the moment. There were hundreds of people that were working and had worked for hundreds and hundreds of hours to prepare me and my crewmate for that EVA. There is money involved. There is work. There is a lot of thinking. There is Mr. Bolden that is expecting results from that EVA. So all those things came together, and somebody made the decision. It's time to go back inside. Now, on the way back, more things happened. I lost that support from the ground because of the structure of the space station, because of the water that went into my ears. It covered my eyes. It went into my nose. I couldn't breathe normally. I couldn't see anything because it covered my eyes. The sunset the sun went down, and in space, when the sun goes down, it's not like on the Earth where you enjoy on the horizon the sun and the colors. Oh, look, it's pink, the pink clouds, how beautiful. When the sun goes down in orbit, the sun is going down, it's gone. And when it's gone, it's
black.
Yes. It's so black that it's not even a color. Black is not a color anymore. It's the absence of colors. It's the absence of light. And because the atmosphere is so rare, there is no refraction. We have little helmet lights, and whatever light comes in front of us, it stays there. It doesn't go beyond because there is no refraction. It doesn't have anything to reflect on. And so the light is really just in front of you. So tonight, if you want to do an experiment of what it was like, go in your bathroom, and if you have a bathtub, fill it up a little bit, like 5 centimeters of water, turn off the light, and put your face in the water, and see what you see. Not much. And until you turn the lights on again. So that was my experience when I was outside. And once again, even though nobody was talking to me at that point, the training that I had received in the previous months, hundreds and hundreds of hours underwater in a spacesuit similar to the one I was wearing, with trainers telling me what I needed to study hard, how I needed to move, work hard. All those three elements came together. I don't take any credit for how I really don't take any credit for how the experience worked, because all I had with me had been given to me by my instructors, by my crew on the ground, by the training team that told me what to study, that told me how to train, and taught me the capability of my spacesuit, and taught me also my capabilities in case of emergency, not like the one I was experiencing, but just emergencies. So when I was in that situation, completely isolated sensorially and also physically, navigating blindly towards the airlock, all these things came together. The long hours underwater, again, hundreds of hours. The long hours in front of a simulator learning how to use the spacesuit and all these different capabilities. All these things came together, and so I was able to go back and navigate back towards the airlock and go back inside. Why is this so important? Why am I talking about this experience and the elements? Because there is something that Director Morsillo talked about, and is how space impacts society. Well, in my experience, I have also experienced the reverse of it, and it's how society, how you have an impact on space flight. See, what happened to me, that very strong experience, and then if you have more questions, I can go into the details, but right now I want to focus on one thing. That I learned from that experience that it was a positive experience. Because that day, we found a problem that we didn't know existed, and now that problem is never going to happen again. I can guarantee you, never going to happen again. No other astronauts will have a problem where water goes into his helmet and he doesn't know what to do. It's never going to happen again. So first good result. Actually, the first good result is that I'm here talking. So second good result is that the accident is never going to happen again. The third good result is that when we plan our next spacesuits, because we need those spacesuits to go and leave the print of our boots on the next planet, the next generation of spacesuits will never have that problem. It will have other problems, because it's impossible not to have problems when you talk about technology that's so advanced, millions of moving parts, something that's never been built before. It will have other problems, but it will never have that problem. We also learned, however, that the training we receive as astronauts is excellent, because even though the problem was never thought, we were able to solve it. And that's really the only kind of emergency, is that kind of emergency. As a pilot, I know that I'm trained for all kinds of emergency, but the only real one is the one that I never expected. And so those three things tell me that it's a very good experience. That day was a very good day for exploration. But let me go back to how society influences spaceflight. Those people on the ground are people exactly like you. They're engineers. They were students. Not many years ago, they were students of engineering, aerospace engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, just like you. And they saved, in many ways, my life, sitting in a control room, giving me support. And when you take that and enlarge it a little bit, I'll have to give an example. You as students have all studied geometry. So you know what a tetrahedron is, una piramide equilatera. I think it's one of the most perfect images, because it's so perfect. All the triangle, all the faces of the tetrahedron are exactly the same. But if you think about it, the only way to enlarge, to make it higher, to change the height of the tetrahedron, is to enlarge the base. Now, astronauts have the privilege of being at the very tip of the pyramid. But under the astronauts, giving them supporting them, there is a huge structure of people, of technicians, instructors, administration. They are all building that pyramid. And at the very base, there's you, there's society. So if we want that pyramid to go higher, to reach further distances, if we want to go to Mars, if we want to go to Europa as astronauts, as humans, we need that base to be incredibly large. And that is, again, that is you, when, you as students, you who make a choice to invest your life and your time and your studies into science, technology, engineering, who choose as administrators to support spaceflight. Well, the base becomes wider and wider, and the pyramid becomes taller and taller until we will be able to reach for the stars. And so for that, I'm proud of talking to you, and I am excited to tell you, to thank you for the choice you've made and for the choices that you will make in the future. And with that, I will give the words back to
I have a
Charlie.
question. Any questions out there, first of all? How did, when I went to space, I went in the space shuttle, American space shuttle. We flew it for 30 incredible years, and then we retired the shuttle. And because we had turned to the Russians, to our Russian partners to help us when we lost Columbia back in 2003, then we relied on Soyuz, a Russian spacecraft, to get our crews to and from space. So how did you go for this mission?
Well, first of all, let me start with a thing. As a pilot, I wouldn't say that I would give an arm to fly on the space shuttle, but my pinky toe, I would gladly give it to fly on the space shuttle. It was such an amazing and beautiful machine. So I'm usually exempt from envy, but I'm almost there with pilots that have flown the space shuttle. However, going back to your question about the Soyuz, what an amazing machine! What an amazing machine, and what an opportunity for me to learn about a culture and an engineering mentality completely different from what I'm used to, and I appreciate that. I was amazed at the simplicity of the Soyuz spacecraft. Mm-hmm. I was also amazed at how small it is inside, and I was amazed at the fact that I could fit inside it with the same stubborn approach of a contortionist, because that's what I felt like. The Soyuz was amazing during the launch. Maybe because we were going up, it was incredibly smooth. The accelerations and the insertion to orbit, it was amazing. And just by the book, and the easiest thing I've ever done as an astronaut was riding the Soyuz on the way up. On the way back, however, it was I had fun. For me, it was fun, and I've talked to Samantha, and Samantha is a little shorter than I am, so I think she had an easier she had an easier time than me. But I like roller coasters, and I'm lucky that I love them so much, because it was a little bit like riding a roller coaster at 50 degrees of heat inside, with no air conditioning. And then it was a lot of fun in a way. That through the windows we could see the material burning away at Mach 25. It was a lot of. We laughed a lot when the parachute opened. All of us were like, "Oh, it's opened." Well,
it worked.
We were all laughing, and then the impact on the ground, which is when I really thought about you and your smooth landings on the space shuttles, because the impact on the ground was described best by Paolo Nespoli, I think, my colleague, my Italian colleague and friend, when he said that if you are on the freeway driving an old Fiat 500, the very tight little one, which is a little more comfortable than a Soyuz. So if you imagine that you're driving very slowly on the freeway in a Fiat 500 and you get hit by a very big truck, that is the sensation that we had on. Pretty much very, very accurate. Thank you.
And what we're trying to do now so that the next time Luca gets ready to go fly, he doesn't have to spend like 2 years of his life in Moscow. He can stay with Kathy and the family in Houston and train. In the United States, we're trying to develop right now with 2 American contractors what we call commercial crews. So we're kind of revolutionizing. Luca talked about us feeding on society, what you give us. We're listening to you, and we're trying to revolutionize the way that we go to space today. It used to be that the only way you could go to space was with a government. The only people that could get you to space were the Russians, the Chinese, and NASA. We hope that in 2 years, by 2017, we'll have 2 American companies, Boeing and SpaceX, who will be carrying people to space, carrying crews to space. And the exciting thing about commercial crew is that once it's available and once NASA has verified that it works and everything, then it means that maybe 1 or 2 of you, I won't say a lot, but maybe 1 or 2 of you will have an opportunity to go have the privilege of seeing what Luca and I saw, seeing this planet from that particular vantage point, because both Boeing and SpaceX and other commercial companies, what they envision, what their business model is that they will have NASA, OSI, ESA, other government entities as their customers, but they'll also make themselves available to private enterprise. So that's something that I think you will see coming. A very similar thing to the capsules that we're using on our commercial crews is the vehicle that we are building called Orion. And Orion is the vehicle that's being built to carry humans to deep space destinations like Mars, ultimately back to the moon, because we're going to be operating in and around the moon for about 10-year period of time in the 20s, what we call the proving ground, going back to cislunar space, where we can develop the technologies, understand the human body a little bit better than we do today, because with today's technology, when you strike off for Mars, you got 8 months in front of you just to get there. So it's an 8-month transit to Mars, and then you're going to stay on the planet for probably a year or so, waiting for Mars and Earth to get back aligned so that you can safely get back in 8 months. So there's a lot of work to do, and Luca mentioned it. It mentioned making the base larger. We need you all. We need you to keep doing what you're doing here and to keep studying what you're studying, because we don't have a corner on the knowledge that we need for the technologies that we need. Luca talked about suits. Our suits today are just too bulky. They're much too big for working on a surface. The Apollo astronauts came back and they told us 40 years ago, the suits are too bulky, they're too big. Some of you, if you look at old Apollo footage, you'll look at them kind of skipping across the moon and kind of losing their balance, and that's because you've got this big old, we call it a PLIS, a life support system on your back. We need to be wearing a suit that's not much different than what you wear around today. And some of the suits that Luca and the folk down in Houston are having an opportunity to look at are suits that are much more streamlined, and it doesn't have to be really big. So there are all kinds of things that you will have to do. And you don't have to be a NASA astronaut or a NASA engineer. OSI is an incredible partner. Right now, if you go down to Turin, they're building something called the service module. And the service module is the power and propulsion part for Orion. When we go to deep space, when you go to Mars, Orion's a big vehicle, but it's not roomy enough for astronauts to survive. We can survive about 21 days in the basic Orion vehicle. So you need a house in which you can do stuff, and that's the service module. Guess who's doing the service module? You are. The European Space Agency is doing the service module. So when I talk about the fact that, as you mentioned, Professor, that this is not about the United States ever again. It's an international effort. Everything we do is international, and we need every single partner that we can bring to the fore, because several people talked about looking at Earth and you see no borders. That is so true. My first flight, I'm of African-American descent. I knew my ancestors had come from West Africa, and I spent a whole year just going back and studying geography because I wanted to be able to fly over the continent of Africa, look down and see where my some greats had come from. you fly pretty fast. You know, when we go to space, it takes 8.5 minutes roughly to get to space. And within 10 minutes leaving Florida, you're crossing the continent of Africa. And I looked out the window on my first flight, and I actually welled up, and I had tears coming down my face because I saw this big island. At least that's what it looked like. Well, the big island was Africa. It was the continent of Africa. There in the windscreen. And I really cried because I looked down and I didn't recognize a thing. You know, unlike the globe or unlike the atlas in the classroom, there were no lines. And so Nigeria was not this distinct place. West Africa was not this distinct place. It was just the African continent. You know, you could see the Sahara Desert, you could see the Namib and that kind of stuff, but other than that, no borders. And that's the way we want the world to be. Ultimately, we want the world to be that way. And when I talk about not being afraid of failure, that takes a lot of guts to go out. I think it took a lot of guts for us to go out and say, okay, we're going to put somebody else in a critical way of us getting to Mars. We're going to have the Europeans do the service module. Americans don't like to do things that way. We like to be in charge, you know, and we like to have our own fate in our own hands. It's not like that exploring. If the Europeans don't build a service module, we don't have a service module for Orion, and we don't go to Mars. So we're in this together. And again, it's the message that I think Luca and I are trying to give you. You know, we make an incredible team when we come together and we work on a common mission or a common focus. Okay, no questions, we're going to ask you some. There's somebody who's going to save you.
Just a curiosity, how did water get into the helmet?
Aha!
The $1 million question. So, if you know anything about NASA, it's that if they have a problem, they solve it, and they know exactly. They go back to the source until they know exactly what happened. They are really good at doing that. They've been doing it since the Mercury time, where, you know, on the second flight of Mercury, they lost the capsule because it exploded, because the door exploded. They lost it, and they looked and looked and looked until they found exactly what happened. Apollo 1, Apollo 13, and Luca Parmitano. So they know exactly what happened. So there is a 188 pages book that explains what happened, but I will try to give you the Bignami version of it. Bignami's Cliff Notes in Italian. Yeah. Okay. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of it. And Charlie told you about the backpack, the PLIS, Portable Life Support System. You have to understand that the EMU, the Extravehicular Mobility Unit, is a spacecraft in itself. It looks like a suit, but it's not. It's a spacecraft, a very complex spacecraft. It has a computer in the front. It has a life support system that creates an atmosphere, keeps it pressurized, keeps the astronaut ventilated, because we wouldn't be able to scrub the air from the CO2, and it keeps the astronaut core temperature by cooling. Now the cooling, have you guys seen the movie Gravity? Okay, do you remember the scene where Sandra Bullock takes the spacesuit off and she's wearing hot pants and a tank top? That is not what we wear. It's a lot less glamorous than that. So, underneath the spacesuit, we wear the so-called LCVG, liquid cooling venting garment. What it does, it's a white suit with lots of little tubes that wound around the body, and there's water, very cold water, circulating to extract actively the body temperature, because otherwise we would overheat. Now, in the backpack, there is a pump. It's called FPS. This pump rotates at 18,000 RPM, and it keeps both the water cooling system circulating and also the ventilation system going. Again, we need the ventilation to take the air that we breathe out with CO2 and make it flow, let it flow into the filters to scrub the CO2. So we have water and air. This FPS, this pump, has a system that by centrifugal force separates the water from the air. And the way it works is that there is a little well with 8 holes, and when rotating, the water hits the well and it gets sprayed out by these 8 holes to be recovered while the flow of air keeps going into the system. And the way it flows, it's there is a fan behind the helmet with little holes that have the air flow over the front of the helmet. Now, the 8 holes in my pump had been plugged by silicon residue or inorganic residues. They were completely plugged, but there was absolutely no way that we could know that, and there was no reason that we should know that, because it is not something that was expected. The water circulating inside the spacesuit is supposed to be almost completely pure. So because of a different problem, these 8 holes, every single one of them had completely plugged. So what happened is that the water that was flowing in my system through the liquid cooling system filled up the well, and then it started overflowing. And so the water from the cooling system started flowing into the ventilation system. And so just like drinking water and getting into the wrong pipe, it was the same thing. We were getting water into the ventilation system, and you can imagine that ventilation and water don't go well together. And so it started accumulating in the back of my helmet, and then just by virtue of capillarity, it started flowing on top of my bald head and the cap. I think that maybe if I had a lot of hair, maybe just my hair would have gotten wet, but in my case, it didn't happen, and so it just kept flowing until it reached and covered my eyes, my nose, and my ears. So that is the source of the problem that plugged the FPS. Now, because NASA never leaves things hanging, they ask themselves, but where did the residue, where did the silicon-based residue come from? So it came from the water. There was a batch of water that we used on this specific spacesuit that for a different reason on the ground had been processed incorrectly, and so he had inorganic residue. This is all in the report. So all of this is publicly available online. You can download the book, and if you have trouble sleeping at night, you can read it. It's actually incredibly interesting, and I read it all, and it's really proof of the ingenuity and investigating capabilities of the engineers that went so deep into the threefold, finding all the problems until they got to the source. So there was this incorrectly processed water that got to the space station, that got into the suit, that plugged the holes, that il gatto che mangia il topo che viene mangiato dal cane e così via. La fiera dell'est. And so we went to the end of it, and so that's why I promise you that problem will never happen again. Never. It's impossible. However, because the spacesuits are so important, they are vital. If something happens on the space station, we need to go outside and fix it. And so what did we do while this investigation was still ongoing? Well, more proof of NASA's ingenuity. They came up with a very ingenious, simple system to fix the suit just in case the problem happened again. And so they put a snorkel, just simple tube that the astronauts built in orbit. Imagine now, it's fantastic, just like the movies, just like Apollo 13, where they have to make a round cylinder fit into a square peg. Same thing, they built something that the astronauts could do despite being astronauts. They built something that they could do in orbit, that they could put inside the spacesuit so that in case the helmet filled up with water, they could breathe through the snorkel from the lower part of their suits. And also they installed a highly absorbent pad inside the helmet, so that if the water started spraying again, it would fill up this absorbent material. Can I tell them what it is?
Yeah.
It's a diaper. Pampers.
It's what you wear when you go to space.
That's another part of the non-glamorous side of NASA. Astronauts, don't wear hot pants because we wear a diaper, so it wouldn't fit right.
That's right.
And so, yeah, but they just imagine wearing a diaper on your head, and that's what. Yeah, it's not glamorous, but it works. But it works, and we actually did EVAs wearing with this modified suit, and it worked perfectly. And the astronauts were safe, and they solved the problem and saved the space station, become heroes, come back to ground. And so
they told us they're going to give us the hook shortly. So. Anybody have a question that you did not get to ask? There's one back there, one up here. So if we can get one mic back there and one right here. While they're getting the mics there, the image up on the screen now, remember I talked about the international collaboration, and I talked about our science mission director. Those are the 4 areas of science: earth science, planetary science, heliophysics, down on the lower right, the study of the sun, and then astrophysics. And we now have about 97 active missions, or missions in planning, and of them, almost 70 are international missions with which we have international partners. Question right here.
My question is for you, and it's about the mission to Mars. Large activities of your team at NASA is focused on the mission to Mars. Is it a long-term plan on its soil with manned projects, or your main challenge is just to reach its surface, maybe do short projects, manned short projects?
No, the long-term goal
has
is...
happened with the moon, I mean.
No, that's exactly not the plan. The plan with Mars is, as the president said, as a matter of fact, we have this thing in America called the State of the Union Address. And sometimes it's exciting, depends on what's said. Parts of this one was really exciting because the president surprised us and he talked about going to Mars again. And he is really passionate about going to Mars. It's the president that set the goal, challenged us to put humans on Mars in the 2030s. And once again, in the State of the Union address this year, he said, we're going to Mars, and we're going this time to stay there. So things that we need for you to be thinking about. One of the challenges of Mars is radiation. We think we can survive it, but you don't want to be living on the surface of Mars, without some type of protection. I believe, this is just one person's belief, that humans are going back to caves. We're going to use the Earth's crust as protection, or Mars's crust as protection. I don't want to have Luca or any other astronaut have to go to Mars to dig a hole, to put a habitat.
I'd do it.
So what we're going to, but see, I'm not going to let him do that. But what we're going to do is there's going to be an army of robots that are going to go, and they're going to build the habitat. When military forces go into combat today, no matter where they go, as a general rule, it is not the military forces that go build the habitats. We have engineering companies that go in. Don't ask me how they're allowed to go in and do this, when there's war going on, but they do, and they build the habitats. And so when Luca was on station, Robonaut was there, wasn't it? He actually had a crew member by the name of Robonaut 2. We're beginning now to experiment with Robonaut. It's a humanoid robot. When Luca was there, I think it was just the upper torso.
Yes, and now it's got legs.
Today it actually has legs, and you say, why does it need legs when you're floating all the time? Well, you've got to be able to put yourself in a position where you can do things and get leverage. So Robonaut's going to be able to hook his or its legs. Kathy, okay, we've also got, well, I'm not going to talk about that. But it'll have to hook its legs into a handhold or a grip where it can, turn a wrench and do stuff like that. We actually have robotic devices outside. One is called Dexter, and it's a single arm, but Dexter has already clipped wires, it's twisted wires, it's unscrewed caps. So the next thing we're going to do with Dexter is we're actually going to activate an orbital in-flight refueling system where we're going to take fluid from one container and put it into another to demonstrate that we can do that. Because eventually you want to be able to service satellites, you want to be able to do a lot of different things. So robots are going to go to the surface of Mars, prepare the habitat, and probably be underground habitats or something like that, and we'll come out for short forays during the day and other kinds of things. Mostly for research. I doubt that you're going to want to take your family and move them to Mars, because you're that dissatisfied with Earth. I don't think so. But there was a question back there, and that'll probably be the last question.
Do you also get the chills down your spine when he talks about Mars? Because I do. Oh, man.
That's curiosity, and that's an artist concept. When I talk about international things, again, see the tower kind of sticking up with the cameras on the top? How many of you know James Cameron, the cinematographer? What was the movie? The big, which one? Yeah, it's about these things like people. Avatar. The cameras on the podium there are James Cameron's cameras. He actually wanted to fly 3D cameras, but technically it wasn't quite ready yet, and we needed to fly Curiosity, so he's now working on a set of 3D cameras, but he uses 2 monocular cameras and uses a computer to put them together. So when you see 3D images from the surface of Mars today, they're coming through 2 monocular cameras that have been processed. The pole, the platform itself, was made in Spain, outside of Madrid at the Astrobiology Center. That's our weather station. So we get weather every single day, several times a day from Mars. And it's coming through the Spanish weather station done by the Astrobiology Center in Madrid, Spain. Question back there, and that's probably going to be the last question.
I would like to go a little back to not being afraid of our future, our failure. And in the 21st century, we're so, especially students, we're so afraid about what we are going to do and after studying. What we do, our job. Job as the main preoccupation of students. But my question is this: when you were young, like us, 20, 21 years old, were you afraid about what would you have become?
I didn't have a clue. I'm serious. I'll tell you the story really quick, and then Luca may have one. In 7th grade, I saw a program on television called Men of Annapolis, and it was about life at the United States Naval Academy. I fell in love with the United States Naval Academy from a television program, and I said, that's where I want to go to school. I had no idea what the Navy did. My dad had served in the Army in World War II, but didn't talk about it at all because that generation doesn't talk about their experiences in World War II. So I decided I wanted to go to the Naval Academy because of the high-collared white uniform that really made you look sharp, and the fact that all the women came from all over the Northeast on the weekends. So, I was a typical male. I was looking forward to this stuff. I struggled to get to the Naval Academy. I wrote my congressman and everything. When Luca talks about, we both talk about failure. My senior year in high school, the President of the United States was John Kennedy, and he was assassinated in November of my senior year in high school. To go to the Naval Academy, you have to get an appointment by somebody, and it has to be a congressman, a senator, or the Vice President of the United States. I had been writing Vice President Johnson for 2 years, and he kept saying, okay, I got it, but it's too early. When you're a senior, write me, and I'll see what I can do. Well, Vice President Johnson became President of the United States, which meant this guy I'd been talking to through letters for 2 years, he was no longer going to help me get to the Naval Academy. So I said, okay, screw it. I picked up my pen and paper and I wrote a letter. And I now have a copy. I got a copy of the letter the other day from the National Archives. I wrote this letter to President Johnson. I said, Mr. President, I realize I'm not eligible for an appointment from you, but I need help. I can't get an appointment from my home state of South Carolina. Help me. Didn't hear from him at all, but a week later, there was a Navy recruiter on my front door saying, hey, I understand you want to go to the Naval Academy. I said, you bet I do. Got an appointment to the Naval Academy, got there, and hated it. It was hard. They didn't want me there. People were mean. And I called my mom and dad every single weekend, and I said, look, I know how badly I said I wanted to come here. I want to come home. I said, I can't handle this. This is too hard. I want to come home. I literally cried. I'd get under my desk and cry. And my dad would who was my high school football coach, my hero, My dad would get on the phone, he'd say, hang in there one more week. I said, but I don't like it here. He said, hang in there one more week. 52 weeks. My dad told me, hang in there one more week. 52 weeks. I hung in there one more week, and I got through plebe year, the freshman year, and I managed to get out of the Naval Academy, but I had no clue what I was going to do. I knew two things. I was not going to be a United States Marine because they were crazy, and I was not going to fly airplanes because that was inherently dangerous. Guess what? One of the first people I met who impressed me at the Naval Academy was my first company officer who was a young major in the Marine Corps. And when it was time for me to graduate, I said, I want to be like him. Just like that. I said, I want to be like him. So I became a Marine. I found out I did not like crawling around in the mud like he did. And so my wife said, why don't we go to Pensacola? I said, because that's where airplanes are. And I don't want to fly. She said, we need to go to Pensacola. And that was 47 years ago. And my wife has always been right. And so learn that, okay? Yes, ma'am. Just say, yes, Kathy, and you'll be okay. 47 years.
Oh, 20 years I've been doing that.
That's right. But we went to Pensacola, and the first time I got in an airplane and we lifted off, I fell in love with it. I could not believe how fascinating it was to fly. And then that led to becoming a test pilot, never dreaming of being an astronaut, finally applying for the program and getting in. So I know you're afraid. If you're not, something's wrong. There is no certainty in life. That's why we take risks. But that's also why we study and we work our little butts off. You want to be the best in your field. And I can guarantee you, if you study really hard and prepare yourself and work hard at it, somebody's going to give you a job. It may not be the job you want right away, but you got to have a job to get a job. There's a saying. So, if you can find a job and it's not exactly what you want, take it. And then work your way into what you want. We've got to go, but I want to, this is an image I want, this is what, I took this, this was actually taken by an IMAX camera that was in the payload bay of the shuttle Discovery on the flight that we deployed the Hubble Space Telescope. We see, it doesn't do it justice, but that's the Middle East. And when you look from the cupola on station, or you look out a window of any spacecraft, you see this incredible Earth. We live on an absolutely incredible, breathtaking planet. But again, that's a pretty violent part of the world. When you realize where you're looking at, at eastern Egypt, the Nile River, the Sinai Peninsula, Western Saudi Arabia. If you're a person of faith, whether it's the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, there are all kinds of stories. That's the origin of the three major religions in the world. And you sit there and you look at it from space, and you go, something's wrong. Why is it not really the way it looks? And you come back, and I think most of us say, what can we do? What can we do to make it different? And it just kind of, in a way, it kind of haunts you. So I want to leave you with a story. And it's a true story. It's about a young man whose name was Nkosi Johnson. And he was born with AIDS. He was born in a small village outside of near Cape Town, South Africa, called KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. His mother had AIDS, and so she knew she probably was not going to live very long after he was born. And she found a young white woman by the name of Gail Johnson, and she said, Gail, should I die after my son is born, would you take care of him? Would you adopt him and raise him for me? And Gail Johnson said, sure, but you're going to be okay. Well, sure enough, after Nkosi was born, his mother died. And he had been infected in childbirth. So here he is, this infant, infected with AIDS. And over the course of his life, people who knew him said he was not a normal child. From the moment he could speak, he was always saying, we need to do this, we need to do that. We need to take care of the village. We need to figure out this disease. And that's the way he grew. And his mother, his adoptive mother, and he traveled throughout South Africa. At the time, the president didn't believe in AIDS. And so that was difficult in itself to strike out against your own government. And they went all over the African continent, finally traveled around the world on talk shows and the like. An American writer heard about him and traveled to South Africa and talked to him. And here's this little kid. He said, Nkosi, why do you do what you do? And Nkosi said, well, I may be small, I may be poor, I may be black, I may have AIDS, but in this world we're all the same. And the writer, Jim Wooten, came back, wrote a very small book called The Life of Nkosi Johnson, We Are All the Same. You can get it on Amazon, and it's really easy read. And Jim came back to the U.S., and several months later he got another call and said, hey, Jim, if you want to see Nkosi again, you need to hustle back, because he is not going to live very much longer. He's on his deathbed. And Jim Wooten got in an airplane, flew all the way back to South Africa, sat by Nkosi's bedside, and he said, there was Nkosi, pus, sores, his body just racked. He was 12 years old, 12 years old, and he weighed about 20 pounds, and nothing but skin and bone, and he's telling people, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do this. And Jim Wooten said, Nkosi, stop, just stop. You're going to die. And he said, Nkosi looked up at him and he smiled. He had these beautiful white teeth looking in this frail white black face, and he said, yep. He said, but you could die today. He said, yep. He said, why do you do what you do? I don't understand it. Gail tells me you won't take your medications. There's all kinds of stuff you could do to help yourself, and you don't even seem to care about you. All you're caring about is the other people around you and making the world better. Why do you do that? And he said, Nkosi looked up at him and he smiled and said, do all you can with what you have in the time that you have in the place that you are. So if you don't remember anything that we said today, make the world better. I mean, you are blessed to be here at this school. Take advantage of it. Do all you can with what you have in the time that you have in the place that you are. God bless all of you. Thanks so very much for letting Luca and I come into your lives today. But it's been fun. Thanks a lot.